Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this week's Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about the things that we do as leaders if we are in a kind of remote or flexible work environment. Maybe some of us are, at least one day or several days a week, or maybe your whole week is spent away from an office when it used to be before. And I want to talk about why it's important to kind of be in a leadership mindset or a work mindset, even if you are not going to be in an office. And the reason why I bring this up is because I've seen kind of like this trend of people talking about how, it started out joking, like, oh, if I'm work from home, you do a Zoom call and you're wearing a suit and tie, but then the guy stands up at the last minute and he's in underwear and he walks away. That's kind of like the joke around it. But now there's like this kind of trend of people talking about how, one of the benefits of the work from home movement is that, I didn't have to shower today, or I didn't have to do this kind of thing. And I think that I love that. I love the empowerment of that. I love the feeling of like you get some of your time back. But there might be some positives that go along with some of these things that we used to do, even if we don't necessarily have to do them anymore. I don't know. What do you think about this?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think that there's an element of kind of comfort and time that you get, obviously, when you don't have to travel somewhere for a job. But also, to your point, I think we've talked about this before, is just around routines and what do you do and what are the things and how do you prepare. And I know things for me in the morning, as I've talked about in the podcast, walking the dogs and listening to a podcast and catching up, and then like checking work emails and things like that before I even leave for the day, or, like listening to some type of either inspirational podcast, YouTube stuff, whatever it is that I want to do that helps me get going for the day. And then I get in the car and then maybe I'm making some phone calls, maybe I'm listening to something else. Like, there are these things that happen that when you get to the point of responsibility as a leader doing your job, you're awake, you're engaged, you've had a chance to kind of collect your thoughts and be prepared for the day. And I think the work from home environment, I know personally, I have to do that. Like even for the podcast, as an informal as we are over the years that we've done the podcast, and the ability for us to just jump in the studios and record real quick. Like I step in a couple minutes early, I get my thoughts together, I pull up a couple of different things, and I'm prepared and ready to go. I have my water right here, like all these little things to make sure that what we want to put out or what we want to do is of quality and of thought. Is the same thing specifically in leadership, of thinking about whether I'm engaging you across the table, face to face, or in an office, or over a camera. I still owe it to you as somebody that I may be leading to be prepared for that conversation, be ready for it, and not to waste your time, or not to role model this element of maybe disengagement or not being prepared. Because we know what happens when you have leaders that role model the wrong behaviors. Those typically get picked up the fastest. So that's kind of where I'm at with the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. There are days when I know I might have conference calls and I want to take my kids to school in the morning, and I'll get up and brush my teeth and I'll get a cup of coffee, but I might not shower until after my second or third conference call. Maybe I'm more likely to go to the gym or exercise if I know I haven't already showered first thing in the morning, because then I think, I got to do it twice. And so there are benefits to kind of having control over when you do the things that you do. But I remember when COVID first started and thinking that it was tough to do all of the exact same things that I did before going into a place to work, to now like force myself to do all those things while not having to go. And I had there was a person that I was on a couple of conference calls with who was dressed like they used to dress going to the office. And I remember thinking, like, that's kind of different. That's kind of interesting. And I asked them about it, and they said that they can't get into the work mindset. They can't feel like they're at work unless they do this thing. And my knee jerk was to say, well, that just sucks to be you. Like, I'm happy to do this without having to put on a dress shirt, But there's some truth to that. There's a difference in how we show up when we are in the mindset. It's the whole act as if thing. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is there something that when we transition to work from home, think back to mid 2020, when we never knew what the final outcome was going to be, was there something that you gave up because you didn't have to do it anymore, and then over time realized, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have given that up, and you brought it back into your life. So I want to ask you that, but first I want to give it up to a word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, what's something you gave up that you thought, thank goodness that I don't have to have that in my life anymore, and then something else made you realize that there's a reason you had it in your life, and it wasn't just so that people don't look at you funny?
It's funny. It was for me like writing things down on pen and paper in my book. Because what ended up happening quickly in the virtual world is like you have this feeling that you have to be attentive to the camera. You have this feeling that you have to look at the camera or look at the screen and the person that you're talking to at all times. And what ended up happening was it became a lot easier to do that in type on a computer because you're looking at a screen, you're looking at a camera, it's all kind of in the same frame. And so when you take notes and you type stuff down, it's all right there. It seems awkward to listen to what people are saying and then tilt your head to the side, put your head down. It looks like, am I doing something I shouldn't be doing? Am I playing a video game? Am I messing around? Like, am I not paying attention? Like all the things that you get in an environment where you're physically there together, and you can see me nod my head and write something down as a note and come back to the conversation. You lose some of that in the virtual space. And so for me, I found myself using the technology and typing and taking notes. And then I realized like I'm not remembering things as well as I used to. I'm having a harder time referencing, instead of flipping to the page of the person's name on it and kind of looking at what I looked at before, I now have to search for their name. I have to search for the note. Like it just became a lot. But I realized, after about I don't know, maybe 45 days of doing it, that I'm like, this is not actually working well. So then I would tell people on calls, I'd pull up my notebook and say, hey, just so you know, I'm taking my notes right here with my pen. So I do apologize if I put my head down to write something down. But it's easier for me to remember things. And then people are like, okay, cool, it's all good. But like I found myself having to preface that more as a behavior that I really need to do as a leader that's really helpful in me keeping track of things and being effective at remembering the things that I write down.
I like that a lot because there's something that I just thought of, and now I might have to go back and ask this person what the mindset around this was. There was a person that every time I was on a group call or a Zoom call with this group of people on this team, there was somebody on that team whose camera was really far away from them. You almost like you saw their whole kind of desk setup and everything. And I remember thinking, like, everybody else, you get this like framed out, head and torso, and that's it. And this person was back, but he was taking notes. He was the person who writes stuff down instead of typing, and he would always be writing things down. I never questioned whether or not he was like, playing Candy Crush on his phone. He was clearly writing stuff down. I'm wondering now if the reason why he has cameras zoomed out is so people could see what he was doing instead of judge or thinking that he was doing something that he shouldn't be doing or that he wasn't fully engaged in the conversation. I'm gonna have to go back and ask that person that now. But that's really interesting that you actually felt the need to say to the people, hey, don't think I'm not engaged here. This is what I'm doing. When in person they wouldn't even have questioned it because they would have seen what you were doing. For me, it was the ability to be comfortable for a long period of time while on a call. And so when a Zoom call would last a very short period of time before COVID, I look back to what I must have looked like on camera and think, oh my gosh, that was so unprofessional. That was like, the camera is on the laptop screen that's folded back and it's looking up the nose, and you're sitting on like a dining room chair somewhere with a window behind you that makes you all blacked out because the light is coming through like all these things that we don't even think about when we have one Zoom call a quarter because we're in the office all the time, and thinking, okay, if this is something that I'm going to be doing more often, I can't let it be that way. And that's when I took the time to make sure that I could be sitting up straight while looking into a camera, and I got a second microphone because I used my one for podcasting, and I got one for the Zoom calls, and just the things that I did for that I thought were important. And over time I slowly saw other people doing roughly the same thing, like going, okay, I need to make sure that what is the focus here is the content, and not people trying to count the nose hairs on the screen, and then therefore losing what we were there to talk about to begin with. So anything that is a distraction to what you are there to do is really what I'm getting at here. If it will distract from the goal of the call, that's a bad thing. And if you can get rid of that distraction, that's a good thing. Sometimes simply telling the story about what's going on eliminates that distraction, because just like when you talk about writing notes down, the distraction isn't the note writing. The distraction is the person getting out of the mindset of the conversation, because in their mind they're thinking, I wonder what Lorenzo's doing right now. Is he taking notes, or is he playing on his phone? He's sending a text message or something. Like they don't know. And I'll tell you something. When you first started telling your story, the reason why I had a problem with it when it came to note taking is because I didn't even want to type during Zoom calls, because I thought people would judge me as like responding to an email. Yeah, I'm in the call. But really what I'm doing is I'm responding to emails that I should do later on. And so, yeah, there's a lot of this, but really I guess what it comes down to is you got to talk to people about what's actually going on and tell the story of what's happening so that they don't fill in the blanks with their own story.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.